The bodyguard grabbed the attending physician by the collar and slammed him against the wall. "You touch him without her permission, and I will bury you before morning." 3 nurses froze. A security guard reached for his radio and was shoved to the floor before he could press a single button. The ER of Northwestern Memorial Hospital, one of the most respected trauma centers in Chicago, had just been taken hostage by 2 men in black suits. And the unconscious man bleeding out on the gurney between them was the reason no one in this city slept easy. His name was John Mercer. And the only person in that building brave enough or foolish enough to step forward and say, "Everyone move, I've got him," was a 28-year-old rookie nurse named Lily Hayes. If this story moves you, please subscribe to our channel, hit the notification bell, and drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story has traveled. It wasn't the kind of rain that tapped politely on windows. It came sideways in sheets driven by a wind that rattled the hospital's sliding doors every time they opened. At 2 in the morning, Northwestern Memorial's emergency room was running at half capacity, a Tuesday night lull that the overnight staff had been grateful for, until the black Cadillac Escalade jumped the curb outside the ambulance bay, and 2 men built like concrete walls exploded through the entrance, carrying a 3rd man between them. Lily Hayes heard the commotion before she saw it. She was at the medication station charting a discharge when the automatic doors burst open and someone behind her said, "Oh, God." She turned. The man they were carrying wore a suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Dark charcoal fine stitching, now ruined by the blood soaking through the left side of his chest and spreading down his abdomen. His head lolled forward. His breathing was shallow and uneven, the kind of breathing that told any trained medical professional that time was already running out. "We need help. He's been stabbed. Somebody help him right now." The taller of the 2 bodyguards, a man with a shaved head and a jaw like a cinder block, was the one shouting. His partner, quieter but visibly more dangerous, said nothing. His eyes swept the room like a surveillance camera cataloging every person, every exit, every potential threat. Nurse Jackie Tran, the charge nurse on duty, moved first. She was good at her job, efficient and unflappable, and she'd handled violent patients and chaotic nights before. She stepped toward the men with a clipboard in her hand and said, "Sir, I need you to set him down on the gurney and step back so we can—" The quiet one moved so fast that no one fully processed what happened until it was already over. His hand closed around the arm of Dr. Franklin, who had just emerged from behind the curtain, and he shoved the older physician into the wall with a sound that made everyone in the room go absolutely still. "You touch him without her in the room," the man said quietly, his voice completely level, "and I will end your career before the sun comes up. You understand me?" Dr. Franklin, a 62-year-old trauma physician who had worked war zones and mass casualty events, pressed himself against the wall and said nothing. A security guard named Davis reached for his radio. The quiet bodyguard turned, looked at him once, just once, and Davis put the radio back on his belt. The room had gone cold. Jackie had stopped moving. The other nurses stood like statues. The patient on the gurney was dying by the second, and nobody was moving, because 2 men with the demeanor of people who had hurt others before were standing in the way. It was Lily who moved. She didn't make a conscious decision exactly. She heard the wet, labored sound of the man's breathing, the specific, terrible sound of a lung fighting to expand against internal pressure, and her body responded before her mind could talk her out of it. She walked past Jackie, past the frozen security guard, past the bodyguard who turned sharply to track her movement, and she stepped up to the gurney and put 2 fingers on the man's neck. "Pulse is weak and thready. He's in hemorrhagic shock." She looked up at the quiet bodyguard directly. "I'm Nurse Lily Hayes. I'm going to help him. You're going to step back and let me do my job. If you don't, he dies on this gurney in the next 4 minutes. Your choice." The bodyguard stared at her. No one breathed. He stepped back. "Jackie," Lily said without looking away from the patient. "I need Dr. Reeves from surgical, right now. Get me a trauma bay, 2 large-bore IVs, O-negative blood, and someone call the OR and tell them we're coming. Move." The room unfroze. The man on the gurney, she didn't know his name yet, was wheeled behind trauma bay curtains with practiced urgency, nurses and techs materializing from every direction with the choreographed efficiency of people who had trained for exactly this. Lily worked with her hands, while her mind cataloged everything at once. the knife wound angled upward, under the left rib cage, the concerning amount of blood loss, the pallor of his skin, the tattoos on his forearms partially visible under his rolled sleeve. Dark, deliberate, the kind of ink that told stories she wasn't sure she wanted to read. His eyes opened. She hadn't expected that. Most patients this far into shock were unconscious or barely responsive. But this man's eyes opened, and they were gray. The cold, flat gray of storm clouds, right before lightning. And they found her face immediately with a focus and precision that made her stomach tighten. "You're going to be fine," she said, her voice professionally steady. "I need you to stay still." He said nothing. He just looked at her. Those gray eyes tracking her every movement with an alertness that seemed impossible given how much blood he'd lost. She had taken care of hundreds of patients. She had looked into the eyes of people who were frightened, people who were angry, people who were in denial. This man was none of those things. He was watching her with the same expression you might give a chess piece you were considering for a very important move. It unsettled her more than the blood did. Dr. Reeves arrived 12 minutes later, a compact man with thick glasses and the controlled energy of someone who preferred surgery to conversation. He assessed the wound, looked at Lily's work, securing the airway and establishing the IV lines, and gave her a single nod, the closest he ever came to a compliment. "Good job, nurse. He's going upstairs. Let's go." As the gurney moved toward the elevator, the bald bodyguard fell into step beside it and looked down at Lily. "You coming?" "I don't go to OR, she said. "You're coming," he said. It wasn't a question. She looked at Dr. Reeves. He gave her a small, careful shrug that said, "I am not fighting these men tonight." She looked back at the bodyguard and said, "I'll stay in the waiting area outside surgical. That's as far as I go." He seemed to calculate something behind his eyes. Then he nodded once. She spent the next 3 hours in a hallway chair outside the surgical suite with a cup of terrible coffee going cold in her hands, listening to the muffled sounds of the OR and trying to make sense of what her body was still feeling. The residual adrenaline, the hyper-alert prickling at the back of her neck, the strange and completely irrational awareness that whatever had just happened was not finished yet. The quiet bodyguard stood 6 feet away from her the entire time. He never sat, he never spoke. He simply stood and watched the surgical suite doors like he could see through them by willpower alone. Lily's phone buzzed at 3:45 in the morning. A text from her roommate, Maya. "You alive? You were supposed to be home at 3. She typed back, "Long night. Don't wait up." She stared at the screen for a moment, then typed, "Also, I think I might be in trouble." Then she deleted that part before sending. At 4:17 a.m., the surgical doors opened and Dr. Reeves came out peeling off his gloves. He looked tired, but not defeated. "He's stable. It was close the blade nicked the left ventricle. Another 10 minutes and he would have bled out internally before we could have done anything." He glanced at Lily. "Your field stabilization bought him exactly the time he needed. Good work." He walked away before she could respond. The bald bodyguard let out a long, controlled breath. The quiet one who she would later learn went by Ren simply straightened his jacket and said thank you. Those were the first words he had said to her that weren't a threat. She noted that he said them like they cost him something. She went home at 5 in the morning, slept for 4 hours, came back for her next shift, and told herself that the previous night was over. The man was stable. The surgery was done. She had done her job. That was the end of it. She was wrong about that in every possible way. She was back on the floor by noon, a quieter daytime shift with routine cases, and the kind of ordinary hospital noise that she usually found grounding. She was doing a medication check on a patient in room 114 when Jackie appeared in the doorway and gave her a look that Lily had learned to read over 2 years of working with her. It was the look that meant something has happened and you are not going to like it. "What?" Lily said. "The patient from last night," Jackie said, keeping her voice low. "The one they took up to surgical." "I know who you mean. He's been moved to the private suite on the 7th floor. Administration apparently cleared it with the board in the middle of the night. He has his own room, his own nurses. Well, they tried to assign our nurses, but both of them came back down after an hour saying they weren't comfortable." Jackie paused. "And there's a man at the charge desk asking for you by name." Lily put down the medication tray carefully. "What did you say?" "I said I'd check if you were available." "I'm not available." "Lily, I have patience, Jackie. Tell him I have patience." Jackie looked at her with something that was half pity and half the careful neutrality of someone who had worked in Chicago hospitals long enough to know that some conversations were better finished quickly. He left a number and said you should call when you have a moment. He was very, she searched for the word, polite about it, which somehow made it worse. Lily finished her medication round, completed 2 patient assessments, answered a family's questions about a post-op recovery plan, and stood in the supply closet for 3 minutes with her back against the metal shelving, breathing slowly and thinking about nothing at all. Then she took the number from Jackie and called it. The phone rang once. "Nurse Hayes?" The voice was low and measured the voice of the quiet bodyguard. "Wren. He's asking for you." "I heard. I'm on shift. I have patients." "I understand. He's asking anyway." "I don't make private calls for patients. That's not how this works." "He's aware of that. Then he knows I can't come." A pause. "Nurse Hayes, he asked me to tell you something specific." A brief silence, as if Wren was reading from a note. "He said tell her that I know she has more questions than she's letting on. Tell her she can come ask them." Lily said nothing. "He also said that if she tells me to leave her alone, I will. He wanted you to know that." She stood at the nurse's station with the phone pressed to her ear and stared at the far wall of the corridor without seeing it. She thought about the gray eyes, the impossible alertness in them, even as blood soaked through a designer suit, the way he had watched her hands move without flinching, without fear, just watching with that quiet, calculating certainty. "I'll come during my break," she said. 30 minutes. That's all." "That's all he asked for." She hung up and immediately second-guessed herself for about 45 continuous seconds. Then Jackie appeared at her elbow with a look that suggested she had heard every word. "Lily, don't. You don't have to go. I know. But you're going." "I know." Jackie handed her a cup of coffee like it was a peace offering and walked away without another word. The 7th-floor private suite was a different world from the ER, quieter, carpeted with lighting that was almost warm. The kind of money that bought that kind of room was the kind of money that made institutions reconsider their usual rules, and Lily was aware of that weight as she rode the elevator up. The bald bodyguard she'd learned his name was Torres was standing outside the door. He stepped aside when he saw her and opened it without a word. She walked in. John Mercer was sitting up in the bed. He was pale with the careful stillness of a man managing pain he wasn't going to admit to, and there was a bandage visible above the neckline of the hospital gown. An IV ran into his left arm. His gray eyes found her immediately, the same precision as the night before, the same unsettling quality of absolute focus. "Nurse Hayes," he said. His voice was low and even slightly roughened from the anesthesia tube, not warm, not cold, controlled. "Mr. Mercer," she said. She stayed near the door. "You can sit down." "I'm fine standing." Something moved in his eyes, not quite amusement, but adjacent to it. "You're afraid of me." "I'm cautious of you," she said. "There's a difference. Afraid would mean I couldn't function. Cautious means I'm paying attention." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "You saved my life. I did my job. Your colleagues didn't move. They made a reasonable threat assessment and decided that the risk outweighed." "I'm not criticizing them," he said. "I'm noting that you were different." He paused. "I want to know why." She stared at him. Of all the conversations she had imagined having in this room, this was not the one she had prepared for. "Because you were dying," she said simply. "That's the only reason I needed. Most people would have let me. I'm not most people." "No," he said quietly. "You're not." The room held the weight of that for a moment. Lily was very aware that she was standing in a hospital room with a man who, by everything she had ever heard about him, had ended lives, destroyed businesses, bought judges and politicians like they were commodities. And yet he was lying in a hospital bed, looking at her like she was something he was genuinely trying to understand. "You said I had questions," she said. "Don't you? Who stabbed you?" He said nothing for a moment, then, "Someone who thought they could." "Are they going to try again?" "No." She didn't ask how he could be certain of that. She was already fairly sure she didn't want the answer. Are my colleagues in any danger, the staff here who treated you? No. Flat and immediate. Anyone who works in this hospital is completely untouched. You have my word on that. Your word, she repeated. I understand why that means nothing to you. It means something, she said, surprising herself slightly. I just don't know yet what. He studied her with those gray eyes. There was something shifting behind them, something she couldn't quite name. Not desire, not manipulation, something more complicated. Like a man who had navigated the world entirely on his own terms, suddenly encountering a situation he hadn't fully planned for. I want to ask you something, he said. You can ask. Would you be willing to provide my continued care here in this facility? I understand it's outside the standard. I'm a floor nurse, she said, not a private caregiver, and even if I were, the answer would be no. Because of who I am, because it wouldn't be professional, and because it wouldn't be good for you. She tilted her head slightly. You need a consistent surgical follow-up wound care twice daily and monitored physical therapy when you're cleared for it. That's a care team, Mr. Mercer, not one person. He was quiet for a moment. You've already thought about my recovery plan. She blinked. She had. Somewhere between the elevator and this room, she had run the clinical mathematics of his case automatically the same way she did for every patient who passed through her hands. That's what I do, she said. I know, he said. That's why I asked for you. There was a knock at the door, and Torres opened it a crack and said, 10 minutes, boss. John Mercer didn't break eye contact with her. I won't keep you from your patients, he said, but I'd like to ask one more thing. What? Come back tomorrow, just to check the wound. You don't have to stay. You don't have to talk to me. Just do what you would do for any patient. She held his gaze for 3 long seconds. I'll check the chart tonight, she said. If the wound care log shows the assigned nurse has done it correctly, I won't need to come. She turned and walked to the door. Nurse Hayes? She stopped, but didn't turn around. Thank you, he said, for last night. She walked out without responding. Not because she didn't want to, because the honest answer, you're welcome, and I would do it again, and I haven't stopped thinking about your eyes since the moment they opened, was not an answer she was prepared to say out loud to a man like John Mercer. Not yet. The afternoon passed in the steady rhythm of routine work, and she told herself 3 times that she was not going to check his chart. She checked it at 6:17 p.m. The wound care entry from the assigned nurse was adequate. Not excellent, adequate. The dressing change had been done correctly, but the notation about wound edge condition was vague, and vague wound edge notations on a cardiac stab wound 2 days post-op were the kind of thing that became problems. She updated the care notes with specific instructions and initialed them. She told herself that was the end of it. Jackie appeared at her elbow again with that same careful expression. You updated his chart. The wound care notes were incomplete. The nurses up there are perfectly qualified. I know they are. The notes were still incomplete. Jackie looked at her for a long moment. Lily, he's not a regular patient. I know what he is. Do you? Lily turned to face her fully. Jackie Tran had been a nurse for 19 years. She had seen everything this city could throw at an ER. She had held the hands of people dying of overdoses and gunshot wounds and heart attacks brought on by years of worry. She was not a person given to melodrama. The look on her face right now was not melodrama. Jackie, Lily said quietly, I know what I'm doing. Jackie was quiet for a moment. Then she said carefully, that's what worries me. Lily's phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered it. He's running a fever, Wren's voice said without preamble. One of the nurses said it was normal. It doesn't seem normal. She was already moving toward the elevator before Wren finished the sentence. What's the temperature? She said, phone pressed to her ear, her other hand jabbing the call button. 102.4. It went up in the last hour. How long has he had it? The nurse said she noticed it at 5. She charted it as post-operative normal and didn't escalate. Lily stepped into the elevator and hit 7. Has he complained of any increased pain at the wound site? He doesn't complain, Wren said, and the way he said it wasn't pride. It was a statement of fact delivered with the faintest trace of concern beneath it. the way you'd describe a quality in someone that was simultaneously admirable and dangerous. Has he shown any sign of increased pain? She corrected. A pause. His jaw's been tight for about 2 hours. Okay. The elevator opened. I'm coming up. She walked the 7th floor corridor with the specific kind of purpose that senior nurses recognized and junior nurses tried to imitate. Torres saw her coming and opened the door before she reached it. The room was different at night, quieter. The city beyond the window was a smear of wet light and traffic noise. John Mercer was sitting up the same way he had been that afternoon, controlled, contained, managing something he wasn't advertising. But there were 2 faint lines between his brows now that hadn't been there earlier, and his color was slightly off. Not dramatically, just enough. She crossed to the bedside table without greeting him and picked up the chart the floor nurse had left. She read it in about 20 seconds, set it down and said, "I need to look at the wound." "Hello to you too," he said. "Hello, I need to look at the wound." Something flickered at the corner of his mouth. He shifted carefully and allowed her to peel back the edge of the dressing. She examined the wound edges without speaking for a long moment. The suture line was intact, no gross signs of infection yet, but the tissue around 2 of the sutures was slightly warmer than it should have been, and there was the beginning of what might become a problem if it wasn't addressed in the next 12 hours. The surgeon who closed this used interrupted sutures throughout. She said more to herself than to him, which is correct. But whoever did the dressing change this afternoon applied the adhesive too close to the wound margin and it's trapping moisture. That's what's starting the inflammatory response. She smoothed the new dressing she'd brought with her over the site with careful, precise hands. It's not infected, not yet, but it would have been by morning. John was watching her face, not her hands. "You knew," he said. "I suspected. The notes were vague." "You updated my chart this afternoon?" She pressed the last edge of the dressing flat and stepped back. "You shouldn't have been able to read that. Ren monitors everything connected to my care." She looked at Ren, who was standing near the door with his hands clasped and his expression professionally blank. "He can read medical charts. I can read anything relevant to his safety," Ren said simply. She turned back to John. "Your temperature is a response to the dressing issue, and possibly some residual surgical inflammation. I'm going to recommend a specific wound care protocol to the charge nurse up here, and I'm going to call Dr. Reeves tonight and flag it. If the fever isn't down by morning, he'll want to reassess." She picked up her supply tray. "Take the ibuprofen they offered you earlier, the one the night nurse charted that you refused." "I don't like medication that dulls." "It won't dull anything meaningful," she said. "It'll bring your temperature down and reduce the inflammatory load on the surgical site. You refusing it is not strength, Mr. Mercer. It's just harder to treat." The silence that followed was the kind that had texture to it. She was aware that very few people spoke to this man the way she was speaking to him, and she was aware that he was aware of it, and neither of them was going to name that directly. "All right," he said. She blinked. "All right, I'll take it." She hadn't actually expected that. She recovered quickly. "I'll have the nurse bring it up." She turned toward the door and Torres stepped aside. She was almost through it when John said, "The nurse who did the dressing this afternoon, is she in trouble?" Lily paused. "I didn't report an error. I updated the protocol for the next change. There's a difference." "Why?" She turned back to face him. "Because she made a judgment call that was within standard parameters. She just didn't have the specific context of this wound geometry. That's a training gap, not a failure. I don't report people for training gaps." She held his gaze. "I fix them." John Mercer looked at her for a long moment. Something in his expression shifted, not softer exactly, but less defended. Like a wall that had developed a crack it hadn't planned for and wasn't sure yet whether to repair it or look through it. "Good night, Mr. Mercer," she said. "Good night, Nurse Hayes." She called Dr. Reeves from the stairwell on her way back down. He answered on the 3rd ring, sounding like a man who had learned to wake up instantly and completely. She described the wound assessment. He was quiet for 3 seconds, then said, "Good catch. I'll be there at 6:15 tomorrow. Make sure the floor nurse has the new protocol tonight." "Already done," she said. Another pause. "You're not his assigned nurse, Hayes." "I know. The 7th floor team can handle this. They would have by morning. I just moved the timeline up." Dr. Reeves was quiet for a moment longer than felt comfortable. "All right," he said finally. "See you in the morning." He hung up. She stood in the stairwell for a moment, her hand still on the phone, and she had the distinct and deeply inconvenient thought that she was not handling this the way she should be. That she had gone up to that room not entirely because of a vague wound notation, and the sooner she admitted that to herself, the sooner she could do something intelligent about it. She went back to her floor. She finished her shift. She drove home in the pre-dawn quiet of a city finally exhaling after the rain. Maya was asleep. Lily made tea she didn't drink and sat at the kitchen table and thought about gray eyes and the specific feeling of a man watching you like you were the most interesting thing he had encountered in a long time. It was not a comfortable feeling. It was the kind of feeling that had a weight to it that sat in your chest and pressed. She went to sleep at 6 a.m. and dreamed about nothing she could remember. The next morning brought Dr. Reeves a revised wound care order and the news that John Mercer's fever had broken at 4:15 a.m. and was holding at 98.6. Dr. Reeves examined the wound personally, confirmed Lily's assessment from the night before, and signed off on the new protocol with the particular efficiency of a man who valued competence enough not to ask unnecessary questions about how it had arrived. Lily was doing rounds on her own floor when the day shifted. She was in the middle of a blood pressure check on a patient in room 108 when she heard raised voices from the direction of the nurses' station. Not patient voices, visitor voices, male plural, with the kind of volume that men use when they want a room to understand that they are not used to being told no. She finished the blood pressure check, excused herself, and walked out. There were 3 of them at the station. 2 in expensive clothes and 1 in a suit that was slightly less expensive, which meant he was doing the talking. He was leaning over the counter toward Jackie with the body language of a man who had decided that physical proximity was a form of persuasion. "I just need to know which floor he's on," the man was saying. "That's all, just a floor number, I'm family." Jackie, to her absolute credit, had both hands flat on the desk and was meeting his gaze with the calm stoniness of a person who had been dealing with this category of situation since before this man learned to tie his shoes. "Sir, I cannot confirm or deny the presence of any patient in this facility without, I've been trying to reach him for 2 days and nobody will, sir." Lily walked to the station and stood beside Jackie. She looked at the man directly. "Can I help you?" He turned to her. He was maybe 40 with the kind of physical presence that came from being told you were important for a long time. His eyes moved over her the way people's eyes move over things they're deciding whether to use. "Are you in charge here?" "I'm the senior nurse on this floor. What do you need?" "I need to know if John Mercer is a patient in this hospital." The name landed in the air between them, and she watched the 2 men behind him track her reaction with careful attention. She kept her face neutral. Not forced neutral, the real kind, the kind that came from 2 years of managing emergency situations where showing fear made things worse. "I'm not able to confirm or provide information about any individual patient," she said. "That's HIPAA. It's not negotiable and it's not personal. Lady, I don't think you understand who—" "I understand exactly the situation," she said. "What I understand even more is that you've been raising your voice at my charge nurse for the last several minutes, and that's going to stop right now. If you have a legitimate medical inquiry, you can speak with our patient services coordinator. If you have a family emergency, you can speak with our social work team. Either way, you're going to lower your voice and step back from this counter." The man stared at her. The 2 behind him were very still. Then he smiled. It was not a warm smile. "You're brave," he said. "I'm doing my job," she said. He held her gaze for a moment that stretched past, comfortable, then straightened up, adjusted his jacket and looked at Jackie. "We'll be back," he said like it was a weather forecast. They left. Jackie let out a long, slow breath. "I was about to call security." "You should have called them the second they raised their voices." Lily looked at her. "Call them now and have them log the visit. Names if you got them from any ID physical descriptions time." "Do you know who they were?" "I have a guess." She picked up the phone at the station and dialed the 7th floor. Wren answered on the first ring. "3 men just came to my floor asking about Mr. Mercer by name," she said. "One was early 40s, dark hair, expensive suit scar along the left jaw. The other 2 were larger, didn't speak." A pause that lasted less than a second. "Thank you," Wren said. And then, "Are you all right?" She realized she was gripping the phone slightly harder than necessary. She loosened her fingers. "I'm fine. They left. They won't come back to your floor." She didn't ask how he could be certain. "I want that logged with hospital security." "Already handled," he said, "from our end." She put the phone down and stood still for a moment, the full weight of the situation pressing in from all sides. This was what she had known on some level from the moment those men had carried a bleeding body through the ER doors at 2 a.m. This was not a closed situation. It was not a man who was a patient and would recover and leave, and the story would be over. This was something that had weight and reach, something that extended beyond the walls of this hospital into parts of this city that she had always been careful to stay away from. She was no longer careful enough. She had walked herself right into the middle of it with both eyes open, and the thing that scared her most wasn't the man with the scar along his jaw or the 2 large men who hadn't spoken. It was that she was not actually sorry. By early afternoon, something else had shifted. She felt it before she could explain it, a change in the quality of attention on the floor. More staff than usual, finding reasons to walk past the nurses' station. The hospital administrator, a composed woman named Dr. Patricia Wells, appeared on her floor just after 2 o'clock, looking polished and purposeful, and asking to speak with her privately. They stood in the small office beside the supply room. Dr. Wells had the posture of someone about to deliver news they had rehearsed. "I want to talk to you about the Mercer situation," she said. "All right. The board is aware that you've been providing supplementary care to the patient in the 7th floor suite, above and beyond your floor assignment." Lily kept her face neutral. "I updated a care protocol and flagged a potential wound complication that was addressed by Dr. Reeves. Everything I did was within nursing scope of practice." "I understand that, and Dr. Reeves has spoken very positively about your judgment." Dr. Wells paused. "I'm also aware that there was an incident this morning involving visitors who came to your floor. I logged it with security. Mr. Mercer's team also contacted us." Dr. Wells pressed her lips together briefly. "Lily, I want to be direct with you. This patient has significant resources. His presence in this hospital is generating attention that we would normally want to manage very carefully. The board has been approached about extending his stay under a private care arrangement." Lily was very still. "What kind of arrangement?" "A dedicated care coordinator. Someone he specifically requests. Someone he trusts." Dr. Wells met her eyes. "His representative contacted us this morning and named you." The room was quiet. "No," Lily said. Dr. Wells blinked. "Lily, I'm not a private nurse. I'm an ER and floor nurse, and that's what I want to be. I appreciate that the board is considering the request, but my answer is no. The compensation being discussed is—" "I don't care what the compensation is." She said it simply, not rudely, but without any ambiguity. "That's my answer." Dr. Wells studied her for a moment. "Can I ask why?" Lily thought about it honestly, which was something she owed herself, even if she owed nothing else to this conversation. She thought about the gray eyes, the careful way he watched her, the 3 men who had come to her floor, and the way the quiet one, Wren, had said, "Are you all right?" with something real beneath the professionalism of it. She thought about the way John Mercer had said "you're different," like it was a fact he was filing away a piece of information about the world that didn't match what he'd previously believed to be true. "Because I'm already having trouble remembering why I should keep my distance," she said, which was the most honest thing she'd said all day. "And the answer to that is more distance, not less." Dr. Wells was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I'll relay your response to his representative." Lily walked out of the office and straight into Wren, who was standing in the hallway with the particular quality of stillness that she was starting to recognize as his natural state. She stopped. They looked at each other. "How much of that did you hear?" she said. "The office has thin walls," he said. "I'm going to take that as all of it." She folded her arms. "I meant what I said." "I know you did." He paused. "He'll want to hear it from you." "Then he can call me," she said, "like a normal person." Wren looked at her with an expression that was the closest thing to surprised she had ever seen on his face. "He doesn't call people," he said. "Then maybe it's time he started." She walked back to her floor. 20 minutes later, her cell phone buzzed with an unknown number. She answered it in the break room with the door pulled half closed. "You said no." John Mercer's voice, lower than it had been yesterday, careful over the effort of speaking at length while healing. I said no. Because of me, not the arrangement. She sat down in the break room chair. Yes. A pause. That's honest. I try to be. Another pause, longer. I want you to know something, he said. I didn't ask for you to be put in that position. The arrangement was Wells' idea, not mine. What I asked for was different. What did you ask for? To see you again, he said. Plain and flat and without ornament. That's all. Lily stared at the far wall of the break room. The coffee machine on the counter was making its end-of-cycle noise. Somewhere down the hall, a monitor beeped steadily. Why? She asked. Because you don't look at me the way everyone else does, he said. And I'd like to understand that. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I look at you like you're a patient who almost died and is still recovering and is making choices that could compromise that recovery. Yes, he said. That's what I mean. She didn't answer right away. I'm going to come up tomorrow morning, she said finally, to check the wound, as a nurse. That's the only role I'm accepting. Understood. And you're going to tell the men in expensive suits who came to my floor this morning that it doesn't happen again. A pause. A beat of silence that had something cold in it, not toward her, but toward whoever those men were. Already handled, he said, which was exactly what Wren had said in exactly the same tone. What does handled mean? She said. It means they won't be back. That's not an answer. No, he said. It's not. And then quietly, with a precision that she was beginning to understand, was how he communicated the things that mattered. No one connected to this hospital will be touched. That is a promise, and I don't make those lightly. She believed him. That was the part that kept her awake later, turning it over in the quiet of her apartment while Maya slept and the city hummed outside the window. She believed him completely and immediately, and that told her something about herself that she wasn't entirely ready to sit with. She fell asleep just before midnight and woke up at 5:47, 20 minutes before her alarm, with the clear and certain knowledge that whatever line she had been trying to stand on for the past 2 days, she was no longer standing on it. She was already on the other side. She was already on the other side of that line, and the most honest thing she could do was stop pretending otherwise. She arrived at the 7th floor at 6:40 a.m., 40 minutes before Dr. Reeves's scheduled check. Torres was at his post outside the suite. He nodded at her the way he had started nodding, not with suspicion anymore, but with something closer to recognition, like she had passed a test she hadn't known she was taking. John was awake. She had not yet arrived at a time when he was asleep, which told her something about how he rested and how much. He was sitting up with a tablet in his hands, and he set it face down on the blanket when she came in, not hiding it, just giving her his full attention in the particular way he had, the way that made the rest of the room feel like it had stepped back. "How's the pain this morning?" she said, going directly to the supply tray. "Manageable. On a scale of 1 to 10. 3. She looked at him. "Your jaw is doing the thing again." He blinked, just slightly. "What thing?" "The tight thing. You do it when you're managing more than you're reporting." She snapped on her gloves. "Try again." A pause. 5, he said. It sounded like a minor concession that cost him something. "That's more useful." She began the dressing change with careful hands, working the tape edges gently to protect the surrounding tissue. The fever stayed down overnight. That's good. The wound margin looks better than last night. The moisture issue is resolving. She worked in silence for a moment, then said, "Did you sleep some?" The pain disrupting it. "Thinking," he said. She smoothed the new dressing into place and stepped back to examine her work. "About what?" "You." She pulled off her gloves and dropped them in the wastebin and turned to face him. He was watching her with those gray eyes, and there was no pretense in them, no performance. Just the direct, honest weight of a man who apparently said exactly what he meant when he chose to say anything at all. "That's going to make the professional relationship complicated," she said. "We both know the professional relationship is already complicated," he said. "You came here at 6:40 in the morning on your own time." She didn't deny it. The wound needed checking. Wren could have called the floor nurse. The floor nurse's last dressing notation was still vague. Lily. He said her first name for the first time, and it landed differently than she expected. Not presumptuous, not soft. Just exact. Like he had been holding it at arm's length and decided to set it down between them where they could both see it. She went still. "Sit down," he said. "Please." She sat in the chair beside the bed. Outside Chicago was waking up the low, constant rumble of a city that never fully stopped, just shifted registers between night and day. "I want to tell you something," he said, "and I want you to hear it without the professional wall-up, just for a minute." She looked at him. "All right." "I've been in rooms like this before," he said, "hospital rooms, after situations that went wrong, and every person who came through that door was either afraid of me working for me or pretending to be something they weren't, so they could get something from me." He paused. "You've done none of those things. You argue with me. You correct me. You make me take medication I don't want to take, and you tell me when I'm lying about my pain level, and you do it like I'm just a person." He held her gaze. "I don't remember the last time someone treated me like I was just a person." The room held that for a moment. "You are just a person," she said. "A person with a stab wound and a recovery trajectory that depends on you being honest with your care team." Something moved in his expression, not quite a smile, but the shadow of one. "And that," he said, "is exactly what I mean." She looked at her hands for a moment, then she looked back at him. "I'm not naive about what you do," she said. "I'm not going to pretend I am. The things people say about you, I don't know how much is true and how much is Chicago exaggeration. But I know enough to understand that your world and mine don't belong in the same room." "And yet here we are," he said. "And yet here we are," she agreed. The door opened and Dr. Reeves came in, looked at the two of them, made the rapid assessment of a man who was very good at reading rooms, and said nothing about what he'd walked into. He examined the wound, confirmed Lily's assessment, adjusted one medication, signed the chart, and left in under 8 minutes. As the door clicked shut behind him, John said, "He likes you." "He respects competent work," she said. "That's different from liking. In my experience, those are the same thing." She stood up. "I have to go start my actual shift." "Will you come back this afternoon?" She hesitated. Longer than she should have. "I'll come back this afternoon," she said. "But I need you to understand something first." "Tell me." "This doesn't change my answer from yesterday. I'm not your private nurse. I'm not in your employ. I'm not under your protection or your influence. I come here as myself and I leave as myself. And if at any point that changes, if I feel like I'm being maneuvered or managed, or that my access to you is something your people are using as leverage over me, I walk. For good." He held her gaze through all of it without flinching. "Understood," he said. And then, "I'd expect nothing less." She walked out. In the elevator going down, she pressed her back against the wall and stared at the ceiling and thought, "You are in serious trouble, Lily Hayes." She knew it. She was doing it anyway. Those two facts sat side by side in her chest like mismatched furniture that you arrange and rearrange and eventually just leave where they are because neither one is going anywhere. Her shift that day was a full one. 2 post-surgical admissions, a complicated medication reconciliation for an elderly patient whose family couldn't agree on the history, and a situation in room 112 that required 3 conversations with a frightened man who didn't speak much English and was trying to understand a diagnosis that hadn't been interpreted properly the first time. She found a translator, sat with him for 20 minutes, and watched the fear in his eyes transform into something he could carry. That was the part of the job that never got old. She was eating lunch in the break room when Maya called. "You left early," Maya said. "I had to be somewhere." "At 6:30 a.m. It was work." "Lily, I know your work schedule. Your shift doesn't start until 7:30. She stared at her sandwich. "I had a patient situation." "The Mafia patient situation?" The break room was empty. She put down the sandwich. "How do you know about that?" "Because you told me you thought you were in trouble, and then you deleted it. And because you've come home at 5 in the morning twice this week, smelling like hospital antiseptic and looking like someone who's been thinking really hard about something they don't want to be thinking about." A pause. Also, Jackie called me. Jackie called you, Lily said flatly. She's worried. Jackie needs to mind her. She's your friend, and she's right to be worried. Maya's voice softened. Tell me what's happening. Lily told her. Not all of it. Not the parts that were too specific, too careful, too close, but enough. The night he came in, the surgery, the fever, the 3 men who came to the floor, the phone call, the morning visits, the way he said her name like he'd been deciding whether to and then just decided. When she finished, Maya was quiet for a moment. Okay, Maya said. I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. When don't I? Do you like him not as a patient, as a person? Lily picked up her sandwich again, set it down again. That's a complicated question. It's actually a very simple question. He's not simple. That's not what I asked. She stared at the wall. Yes, she said. I think I do. And I think that's one of the more problematic things I've said out loud in my adult life. Maya was quiet for 3 seconds. Then she said, Be careful, Lily. Please. I'm always careful. You went to his room at 6:30 in the morning. I went to check a wound. Lily. I know, she said. I know. She hung up and sat with the remainder of her lunch break staring at nothing in particular, and she was honest with herself in the way she made herself. Be honest when things mattered. She had known from the moment those gray eyes opened on the trauma gurney that this was not going to be a patient. She forgot. She had known it, and she had kept moving forward anyway, and now she was sitting in a hospital break room trying to remember the last time a person had made her feel this specific quality of alert, like every sense had dialed up a notch, like the air in a room had changed its chemistry. She went back to work. She kept busy. She was deliberate about it. At 3:15, she got a message from Wren. Not a call, a message which felt like a concession to the boundaries she'd laid out. It said only, He's asking if you're still coming this afternoon. She typed back, On my way in 20 minutes. She came through the door of the 7th floor suite at 3:42 and stopped. There was a woman in the room. She was in her late 50s, expensively dressed with silver hair that had been arranged with precision, and eyes that were the same shade of gray as John's, but colder if that was possible, and more certain of their own authority. She was standing near the window with her arms crossed, and she turned when Lily came in with the particular assessment look of a person who sized up threats before anything else. John was in the bed with an expression Lily had not seen on him before. His jaw was set, and his eyes were flat and careful in the specific way of a man containing something large and unwilling. "Who is this?" the woman said. Not to John, to the room. "I'm Nurse Hayes," Lily said. "I'm here for the afternoon wound check." "His care team does that." The woman looked at John. "I arranged for a private nursing service 3 days ago. Why is a hospital floor nurse doing his wound care?" "Because Nurse Hayes is competent," John said. His voice was very even. "The private nurses I arranged are more than competent, John." "They were dismissed." The woman turned back to John with an expression that had edges to it. "Dismissed? By whom?" "By me." Lily stood near the door with her supply tray and said nothing. She had walked into the middle of something that had its own history and its own gravity, and the smartest thing she could do was read the room before she moved in any direction. "You dismissed a professional care team," the woman said, "because of a hospital nurse you've known for 3 days. "Mother." He said the word quietly, but it had the quality of a door closing. Lily recalibrated everything instantly. The gray eyes, the bearing, the complete certainty of being in charge of whatever room she was standing in. Yes, the resemblance was there underneath the different expressions, the different decades. John's mother turned back to Lily with the full, deliberate weight of her attention. "My son has a habit," she said, "of attaching himself to people who catch his interest. It's cost him before." "I understand your concern," Lily said carefully. "I'd have the same concern in your position." The woman blinked, slightly surprised, as if she'd expected deflection or apology and had received neither. "I'm here to check the wound," Lily said. "That's all. If you'd like to step out or stay, that's entirely up to you." A pause. Then the woman, she would later learn her name was Catherine Mercer, made a small controlled gesture that might have been a concession and moved to the far side of the room without actually leaving it. Lily did the wound check. She was thorough, unhurried, and professional. She was aware of Catherine watching every movement with the focused assessment of a woman who had spent decades evaluating people for hidden intentions, and she let herself be watched because she had nothing to hide in this room. The wound was looking significantly better. The tissue was healing cleanly. She noted it in the chart, provided a verbal update to John, and stepped back. "Looking good," she said. "You should be cleared for limited mobility tomorrow if the overnight temp stays stable." "Thank you," he said. His eyes stayed on her face. She nodded and turned. "Nurse Hayes." Catherine's voice. She turned back. The older woman was watching her with something complicated, still guarded, still measuring, but with a layer beneath it that was something else. "How long have you worked here?" "2 years. Before that, 2 years of ICU at Rush." "How old are you?" "About 28. Catherine was quiet for a moment. Her gray eyes moved to her son and then back. "My son is 41 years old," she said. "He has survived 4 attempts on his life. He trusts almost no one. The people he has trusted have without exception wanted something from him." She paused. "What do you want?" The room was very still. Lily looked at her directly. "Nothing," she said. "That's the honest answer. I want nothing from him. I want him to recover correctly and not develop a post-surgical infection and not lie to his care team about his pain level." She held Catherine's gaze. "That's genuinely all." Catherine held her gaze for a long moment. Then she said, "He told me about the night he came in, that you were the one who moved. I was the closest. The others were closer." Lily said nothing. Catherine made that small gesture again, something between acknowledgement and retreat. "Good afternoon, Nurse Hayes." Lily left the room and stood in the corridor for a moment with her hand on the wall, just breathing. Torres was looking at her with what she could only describe as the expression of a man watching someone survive an encounter that most people didn't. "She does that to everyone," he said. "I noticed," Lily said. "You did all right. I told a woman whose son runs half of Chicago's underworld that I want nothing from him." "Yeah," Torres said. "That's why you did all right." She took the elevator down with her supply tray in her hands and stood at the back of the car and pressed her eyes closed for 3 seconds. When she opened them, she was back to herself, or at least the version of herself that could function in a hospital corridor without the echo of this afternoon following her around. She was at the nurse's station updating charts when Jackie appeared with 2 coffees and set one in front of her without ceremony. "I heard Catherine Mercer is upstairs," Jackie said. Lily looked at her. "How do you know that name?" "Lily. I've worked in Chicago for 19 years. Jackie sat down. "Catherine Mercer has donated enough to this hospital to have a wing named after her. She sits on 2 boards. She is by most accounts more frightening than her son." She paused. "How did it go?" "She asked me what I wanted from him." "What did you say?" "Nothing." Jackie sipped her coffee. "And that was true." Lily looked at the chart on her screen. The cursor blinked. "Mostly," she said. Jackie was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Lily, I need to ask you something, and I need you to take it seriously." "Okay. If this goes further, if this becomes something personal, do you understand what that life looks like? Not the money, not the protection, the actual life, the watching over your shoulder, the people who would use you to get to him, the weight of being connected to someone that powerful." Lily turned to look at her. "You think I haven't thought about that?" "I think you think about it, and you keep going to that room anyway." "I know. That's not an argument against what I'm saying." "I know that too." She picked up the coffee. It was exactly how she liked it. Jackie knew everyone's order without writing it down. "I'm not making decisions, Jackie. I'm just not making the decision to stop yet." Jackie looked at her for a long moment. "Okay," she said finally, "but I need you to promise me something." "What?" "That you remember who you are in that room, not who he makes you feel like, who you actually are." Jackie's voice was steady and serious and completely without drama. "Because the moment you start making choices based on who he sees when he looks at you, you've already lost the thing that made him look in the first place." The words landed somewhere deep and solid. Lily sat with them. "That might be the smartest thing anyone said to me all week," she said. "I have my moments." Jackie said, and picked up her own coffee. At 5:47 p.m., Lily's phone buzzed. Unknown number, the one she now recognized as his direct line, the one Wren had given her, and she had saved under an entirely neutral contact name because she wasn't ready to see his name light up her phone every time it rang. She answered it in the supply corridor, standing between shelves of gauze and IV bags. "My mother wants to meet you properly," John said. "Dinner, tomorrow. She asked me to ask you and told me that if I put any pressure on you, she would tell you about it." Lily laughed. It came out before she could stop it, a real surprised, unguarded laugh that bounced off the metal shelving. She heard the quality of silence on the other end of the line change like a room getting lighter. "She actually said that," Lily said, word for word. "I like her. Most people are terrified of her." "I know. She told me that essentially." She leaned against the shelving. "Why does she want to meet me?" "Because she thinks you're either exactly what you appear to be," he said, "or the most sophisticated person she's ever encountered. She needs to know which." "And which do you think?" A pause, the kind that had weight. "I think you're exactly what you appear to be," he said. "And I think that's why she's interested, because she's never met one before." Lily stood in the supply corridor for a moment after she hung up, surrounded by the ordinary industrial smell of a working hospital, and she thought about Catherine Mercer's gray eyes and the question she'd asked, and the answer Lily had given nothing, and whether that was still as completely true as it had been 3 hours ago when she'd said it out loud. She thought it was still mostly true, mostly was doing a lot of work. She went back to her floor. She finished her shift. She said goodnight to Jackie and took the elevator down to the parking structure alone and walked to her car through the particular quiet of a hospital garage at the end of a long day. She sat in the driver's seat for a moment with her keys in her hand. Her phone buzzed. Not his number this time. An unfamiliar number she didn't recognize. She answered it. The voice on the other end was male quiet and spoke with the careful precision of someone reading from a script but trying to sound like they weren't. "Nurse Hayes," it said. "We'd like to talk to you about John Mercer. We think you might be in a position to help us." Lily's hand went very still on the steering wheel. "Who is this?" she said. A pause. "My name is Agent Daniels, Federal Bureau of Investigation." Another pause. "We've been watching Mr. Mercer for 18 months, and now we've been watching you." The parking garage was very quiet, the kind of quiet that made small sounds loud, the distant hum of ventilation, the echo of a car door somewhere on a lower level, the sound of her own breathing, which had gone slightly shallow. "We've been watching you," Agent Daniels said again, as if she needed to hear it twice. "You've been watching me," she repeated. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "How long?" "Since the night he was admitted." A pause. "You've had significant contact with John Mercer over the past 4 days, more than any other hospital staff member. I'm his nurse. You're not assigned to the 7th floor." She stared through the windshield at the concrete wall in front of her car. Her keys were still in her hand, and she was gripping them tightly enough to feel the teeth of them against her palm. "How did you get this number?" "Nurse Hayes, I'd like to meet with you. Tomorrow morning before your shift. There's a coffee shop on Michigan Avenue called the Lakeview Grind. If you could be there at 7. "No," she said. A pause. "I'm sorry." "I said no." She made herself breathe evenly. "You've been watching me without my knowledge. You've called me on a private number, I don't know how you have, and you're asking me to meet you somewhere before I've had any opportunity to think about what that means." She paused. "If you want to talk to me, you come to the hospital. You come through official channels. You show identification to the administration team, and you make an appointment." Silence on the other end. Then, "That approach creates complications." "For you," she said. "Not for me." She took a breath. "I haven't done anything wrong. I've provided medical care to a patient. That's my job. If you believe I've broken a law, you know where to find me. Otherwise, please don't call this number again." She hung up. She sat in the car for 45 seconds without moving. Her heart was going faster than she wanted it to, and she was aware of an acute and uncomfortable clarity settling over her, the kind that came when a situation suddenly had more dimensions than you had originally mapped. She had walked into a complicated situation with her eyes open. She had told herself that twice, but complicated had just added a layer she hadn't accounted for. She drove home. She didn't call anyone. She made dinner, ate half of it, and sat at the kitchen table in the kind of deliberate stillness that she used when she needed to think without interference. Maya came home at 9 and took one look at her face and said, "What happened?" "The FBI called me." Maya sat down very slowly in the chair across from her. Lily told her. All of it this time, what Daniels had said, what she had said back the way the call had ended. Maya listened without interrupting, which was unusual for her, which told Lily how serious Maya understood this to be. When Lily finished, Maya said, "You have to tell him." "I know." "Not through Ren. Him directly." "I know. Tonight, Lily." She looked at the time on her phone. 10:43 p.m. She picked it up and dialed his number. It rang once. "Lily." He said her name the same way he always did exactly. No question in it, no surprise, just the flat certainty of a man who had been expecting the call without knowing when it would come. "Someone called me tonight," she said. "From the FBI. An Agent Daniels. He said they've been watching you for 18 months and that they've been watching me since the night you came in." The silence on the other end lasted 4 seconds. Long for him. She had already learned that he processed fast, that his silences were not confusion, but calculation. "Where are you?" he said. "Home." "Are you safe?" The question surprised her. Not the words, the tone. The tight, controlled urgency beneath the evenness of it. The quality of a man who was running rapid assessments in the background of a conversation while keeping the surface of it completely level. "I'm fine," she said. "He called on my cell and asked me to meet him tomorrow morning. I said no and told him to go through official channels." Another pause. "You said no." "I haven't done anything wrong. I'm not going to behave like I have." She heard something that might have been a slow exhale. "I need Ren to know about this." "I'm telling you, so you can decide what to do with it," she said. "I'm not making decisions for you, but I needed you to know." "Do you understand what this means?" he said. "For you. It means I've been observed having contact with a person under federal surveillance. It means an agent tried to make an unofficial approach to me as a potential source." She paused. "It means I'm sitting at my kitchen table at 10:45 at night, trying to decide if I've made a serious mistake." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Have you?" She thought about it honestly. "I don't know yet," she said. "I haven't done anything I'm ashamed of, but I may have walked into something I didn't fully understand." "Yes," he said. Simply. No apology in it, but no deflection either. "You may have." "Is there something I should know about the investigation?" The silence this time was the kind that had a decision in it. She could almost feel him on the other side of it, measuring something. "There are people who would like to see me removed," he said. "There have been for a long time. What's happening with the federal interest that's more complicated than it appears. I can't tell you everything tonight." A pause. "But I will, if you want to hear it." "I want to hear it," she said. "Tomorrow. Dinner with my mother. We'll talk." She remembered the dinner invitation. It had the surreal quality of something from a different day now, a softer conversation before the parking garage, and the voice of Agent Daniels, and the way the walls of this situation had moved 3 feet closer in the space of one phone call. "All right," she said. "Lily." "Yes." "What you did tonight, refusing to meet him, telling him to go through official channels, that was exactly right." A pause. "Most people wouldn't have done that." "Most people don't think the FBI is wrong by default," she said. "They're not wrong," he said. "They just don't have the full picture." She went to sleep eventually, in the shallow, alert way of someone whose mind has decided that rest and vigilance can coexist if they have to. She woke up at 5:30, earlier than her alarm, with the particular feeling of having processed something overnight that her conscious mind hadn't finished yet. She went to work. She kept her head down and her focus on her patients, 2 new admissions, a discharge that needed careful coordination with the patient's home health team, a family meeting in room 104 that ran long because grief always ran long and there was no useful shortcut for it. She sat with the family for 40 minutes beyond her scheduled time because the patient's daughter was 73 years old and frightened, and nobody else had sat down with her yet. At 11:15, Jackie appeared at the station with the expression she wore when she had heard something and was deciding how to deliver it. "Security flagged something this morning," Jackie said, keeping her voice low. "Two men sat in a car in the visitor parking structure for about 3 hours. Hospital security asked them to move. They showed federal identification." Lily kept her eyes on the chart she was updating. "Okay." "Lily, the FBI is sitting outside this hospital." "I know." Jackie stared at her. "When did you know?" "Since last night." "And you were going to tell me." "I'm telling you now," Lily said. She put down her pen and turned to face Jackie fully. "I got a call last night from an agent. He asked me to meet him. I declined and told him to go through official channels. If they approach anyone on staff through proper channels, hospital administration handles it. That's the process." Jackie looked at her for a long moment. "Are you all right?" "I'm good," Lily said. And strangely, she meant it. The fear from the parking garage last night had settled into something else by morning, something steadier, less panicked. She had done nothing wrong. She would continue doing nothing wrong. She would keep her eyes open and her feet under her and make decisions from her own values the same way she always had. "You're going to dinner with him tonight," Jackie said. It wasn't a question. "With his mother," Lily said. Jackie pressed her lips together. "That's not less alarming, Lily. That's more alarming." Lily almost smiled. "I know." Her shift ended at 3. She went home showered, changed into a dress she hadn't worn in months. Not formal, not trying too hard, just the version of herself that she put on when something felt like it mattered, and she was standing in the hallway checking her coat when Maya came out of her room and leaned against the doorframe and looked at her. "You look good," Maya said. "Thank you." "You're scared." "A little." "Of him or her?" Lily picked up her bag. "Neither," she said honestly. "I'm scared of wanting this to go well." Maya was quiet for a second. Then she said, "Text me when you're on your way home, no matter what time." "I will." "And Lily." Maya's voice followed her toward the door. "You saved his life before you knew a single thing about him. That's who you are. Don't let anyone in that room make you forget it." The restaurant was not what she expected. She had prepared herself for something that announced itself the kind of establishment that functioned as a display of power, all dark leather and deference, and the particular self-importance of expensive places that wanted you to know they were expensive. Instead, Wren took her to a private dining room in a small Italian place on the north side that smelled like garlic and bread and looked like someone's grandmother had decorated it 40 years ago, and no one had wanted to change a single thing since. John was already there. He was in a dark button-down no jacket, the careful movement of someone managing healing ribs, and he stood when she came in the way men of a certain generation and discipline stood automatically without thinking about it. He looked better than he had in the hospital, more color, less gray at the edges, but he was still moving with that faint conservatism that told her the body was still asserting its needs over the will. "You came," he said. "I said I would." He almost smiled. She was starting to be able to see them coming, those almost smiles, the slight softening at the left corner of his mouth, the fractional easing around his eyes, before it pulled back into controlled stillness again. Catherine Mercer was already seated. She looked at Lily when she came in with the same measuring attention as the day before, but something in it was different tonight. Less armor. Not softness. Catherine Mercer did not appear to do softness, but a quality of having made a preliminary decision and being willing to test it. "Nurse Hayes," she said. "Mrs. Mercer." Lily sat across from her. "Thank you for the invitation." "I'll be direct," Catherine said, in the tone of a woman who was always direct and wanted credit for saying so. "Please," Lily said. "I've had 2 people look into your background since yesterday." She paused, as if expecting a reaction. Lily gave her none. "Your record at Northwestern is exceptional. Your record at Rush before that was exceptional. Your nursing school instructors described you in terms they don't use often." Another pause. "You've never had a disciplinary issue. You've never been involved in a personal relationship with a patient. You have no financial difficulties, no legal issues, no obvious vulnerabilities that someone might exploit." "I'm glad the research was thorough," Lily said. Catherine's eyes narrowed slightly, not with hostility, but with the particular focus of someone recalibrating. "You're not upset." "Should I be?" Most people are upset when they find out they've been investigated. You're protecting your son, Lily said. I'd do the same thing. She held Catherine's gaze. Did you find anything concerning? No, Catherine said. A pause. That's concerning in itself. John, who had been watching this exchange with the still attention of a man at a chess match, said, Mother, I'm being honest, Catherine said. You're being interrogating. Those aren't different things. She looked at Lily again. I've spent 40 years watching people approach my son with their own agendas. The genuine ones are rare enough that I've learned not to trust the appearance of them. She picked up her water glass. You appear genuine. I don't know what to do with that yet. You don't have to do anything with it, Lily said. I'm not asking for your approval. The table went very still. Torres, standing near the back wall, looked at the ceiling. Catherine looked at her for a long moment. Then, for the first time, something that was actually close to warmth moved through her expression. Just briefly. No, she said. You're not, are you? John said, she told the FBI agent to go through official channels. Catherine looked at him sharply. When, last night, they made an approach. The warmth in Catherine's expression disappeared, replaced by something colder and more urgent. She looked at Lily. What exactly did they say? Lily told her. The same version she had told John on the phone with the same precision. Catherine listened without interrupting and with the focused stillness of someone storing every detail. When Lily finished, Catherine said Daniel's first name. He didn't give one. Description. I didn't meet him. It was a phone call. Catherine looked at John. Something passed between them in the silence, the compressed language of people who had spent decades reading each other across difficult rooms. John gave a small, controlled nod that meant something she wasn't party to. The investigation, Lily said. He told me he'd explain tonight. John looked at her. I will. He leaned forward slightly, managing the movement carefully. The federal investigation into my organization has been running for 18 months. Most of what they have is circumstantial and they know it. What they want is testimony. They've approached 3 people in my orbit in the last 6 months asking for cooperation. He paused. Those people are no longer accessible to them. Lily processed that. What does that mean, no longer accessible? It means they chose to stop cooperating, he said. All 3 of them voluntarily. She looked at him directly. I need to know if what I'm hearing is the truth. It is. Then I need to hear the rest of it. He held her gaze. The man who stabbed me was not a random attacker and not a rival organization. He was a federal informant who was instructed to create a situation that would put me in a hospital and create proximity to the investigation. He paused. They staged the attack. The table was absolutely silent. Lily sat with that for a moment. They arranged for you to be stabbed. They arranged for the opportunity. The informant exceeded the parameters. His jaw was tight. He was supposed to create a situation that required medical attention, not near cardiac lacerations. And the men who came to my floor, Lily said slowly, the 3 men, also federal, plain clothes, not officially sanctioned, a field team making an unofficial move to get a name from your floor staff before the approach to you. She thought about the man with the scar along his jaw, leaning over Jackie's desk, the way he had used the word family, the calculated performance of it. They were building toward me, she said. Yes, he said. They wanted to use me as a source. Yes, she breathed in slowly. Because of the wound care. Because you have daily unsupervised access to me. Because you're trusted by the floor staff and by the administration. Because you have a clean record and no apparent loyalties and a profile that makes you look like exactly the kind of person who would cooperate with a federal investigation if the approach was made correctly. He paused. They were wrong about the last part. They were wrong about all of it, she said. Catherine was watching her the way she had watched her the day before in the hospital room with that same complex assessment, but the calculation in it was different now. Like the preliminary decision Catherine had arrived with was firming up into something more definitive. What are you going to do? Catherine said. Not to her son, to Lily. Lily looked at her hands for a moment. Then she looked up. The same thing I've been doing, she said. My job, honestly. Without hiding anything. She paused. If the FBI makes an official approach, I'll speak with a lawyer before I respond to anything. But I won't be a source. I won't do that." "Because of him," Catherine said. "Because it would be a betrayal," Lily said. "Of a patient, of a person. I don't do that regardless of who the person is or who's asking." She looked at John. "That's not loyalty to you specifically. That's just who I am." John looked at her for a long moment. Across the table, Catherine made that small gesture again, the one that Lily had begun to recognize as her version of something like respect. Dinner arrived. The shift in the room was palpable. Something had been established. Some ground had been walked and tested and found solid, and the conversation that followed was different. Still careful in places, still layered, but with less of the quality of an examination, and more of the quality of three people who were cautiously beginning to trust the room they were in together. She learned things about John Mercer over the next 2 hours that the rumors didn't contain, that he had started in his father's business at 17 because it was that or watch his mother lose everything when his father died, that he had 3 people on his personal payroll whose only function was funding education programs in neighborhoods the city had given up on, that he had not chosen this life as much as he had chosen to survive it with his own code intact, which was a more complicated thing than either innocence or villainy accounted for. She didn't romanticize it. She heard it clearly, and she held it with the same honesty she applied to everything else, but she heard it. At 9:15, she said she needed to go. John walked her to the car, slowly managing the movement Torres a discreet distance behind, and they stood on the sidewalk in the October cold, with the city going on around them, alive and indifferent in the way cities were. "Thank you for tonight," she said. "Thank you for staying," he said. "And then, I need to tell you something." She looked up at him. "Daniels is going to come back," he said. "Not officially. They'll try another approach. Something that looks more casual, harder to refuse." He held her gaze. "When that happens, and it will, I need you to tell me immediately. Not because I'm asking you to protect me, because they will not play fair with you, and you need to know that before it happens." She nodded slowly. "I know." "Do you—" His voice was quiet. "They'll use whatever is most effective. That might be a threat to your license. It might be a suggestion that your continued contact with me constitutes obstruction. It might be something more personal." He paused. "They will look for the thing that moves you, and they will use it." She held his gaze in the cold evening air and felt the full, clear weight of everything. This was not romantic, not simple, not the version of a story where the complications were merely decorative. This was real weight on real ground with real consequences. "I know what they'll use," she said. "They'll tell me I'm being naive, that I've been manipulated, that I don't actually know you." She paused. "And I'll tell them the same thing I'd tell anyone who tried to make my decisions for me." She met his eyes. "That I'm capable of knowing my own mind." He looked at her for a long moment. The streetlight caught the gray of his eyes, and she thought for the first time clearly enough to admit it to herself that she was already somewhere she had not planned to be, and was not entirely certain she wanted to leave. "Go home," he said. "Get some sleep." "You too," she said. "And take the pain medication tonight. Your jaw was doing the thing again at dinner." He looked faintly startled. Then that almost smile came, and this time it made it further than usual before it pulled back. "Good night, Lily. Good night, John." She drove home with both hands on the wheel and her mind moving fast and clean through everything that had been said and not said and understood between the lines of the evening. She texted Maya from the parking spot home safe. She sat in the car for a minute before going in. Her phone buzzed. Ren, a message, not a call. It said, "There was a man photographing the restaurant entrance from across the street tonight. We have the images. It wasn't Daniels. It was someone else. We're working on the ID." She stared at the message for a long moment. Someone else. She put her phone in her bag and went inside. The story she had walked into, the night John Mercer came through the ER doors, was significantly larger than she had understood it to be, and it was not finished with her yet. That much was completely clear. What was also clear, what had been clear since dinner, since Catherine's careful assessment, softened at the edges, since John said they will use whatever is most effective, and she had heard the thing underneath it, that he wasn't quite saying, was that she wasn't finished with it either. She was not walking away from this. That decision, somewhere between the first gray-eyed moment on the trauma gurney and tonight on a cold Chicago sidewalk, had already been made. Now she had to figure out how to survive it, By 5:15 a.m., she was at the kitchen table with coffee. She wasn't tasting. Wren's message open on her phone, reading the same 11 words over and over. There was a man photographing the restaurant entrance from across the street tonight, not Daniels. Someone else. The someone else was the part that kept snagging in her mind like a thread on a nail. Daniels, she could map federal agent official investigation, a known shape, even if the edges of it were still blurring. Someone else was a different category entirely, and she was experienced enough with uncertainty to know that the categories she couldn't name were the ones that required the most attention. She got to the hospital early. She did her wound check on John at 6:50 a.m. and found the healing significantly advanced. The tissue margins were clean, the inflammation fully resolved, and his temperature had held at 98.6 for 36 consecutive hours. She noted it in the chart with the particular satisfaction of work that had gone right, and she told him so directly. "You're healing faster than the surgical average for this type of wound," she said. "Another 4 to 5 days, and Dr. Reeves will clear you for discharge." John looked at her. "And after discharge?" "After discharge, you follow the outpatient protocol. Wound checks twice weekly for 2 weeks, then weekly for a month. You don't lift anything over 10 pounds for 6 weeks. You don't engage in any activity that strains the thoracic musculature." She met his eyes, which means whatever your normal week looks like, it doesn't look like that for a while. "And will you be part of the outpatient protocol?" She held his gaze. After last night, after the sidewalk and the cold air and everything that had been understood without being said, the question had a different weight than it would have 4 days ago. "We can talk about that when we get there," she said. "That's not a no," he said. "It's not a yes either," she said. "It's a we can talk about that when we get there." He almost smiled. She picked up her supply tray. "Take the medication, all of it on schedule." She moved toward the door. "I'll be back this afternoon." Torres held the door for her with the ease of a man who had stopped treating her like a variable and started treating her like a fixture, which she noted with a private and complicated feeling she did not examine too closely in a hospital corridor at 7 in the morning. Her shift started. She moved through it with the focused rhythm that good nursing required, present attentive, making the 1,000 small decisions that kept people safe and comfortable and moving toward whatever version of better was available to them. She was good at this. She had always been good at this. And she was aware with a clarity that the events of the past week had sharpened rather than blurred that this was not something she was willing to compromise. Not for anyone. Not for any version of any life that might be available to her on the other side of a relationship with John Mercer. This work was not what she did. It was who she was. She was thinking about the difference between doing and being, when Jackie appeared at the station at 10:40 and said quietly and without any opening, "There's a woman waiting in the family lounge. She says she's here about you. Not a patient, not family. She showed security a badge." Lily put down her pen. "FBI." She didn't say which agency. Description: 40s, dark coat, professional. She was very polite about it, which somehow made it worse. Lily finished. "I know." She straightened up. "I'll talk to her. Get administration on the line and tell them we have a federal contact attempting an approach and to send someone from legal to the family lounge in the next 10 minutes. Jackie was already reaching for the phone before Lily finished the sentence. The woman in the family lounge was exactly as Jackie had described. Polished, composed with the practiced stillness of someone trained to appear less threatening than they were. She stood when Lily came in and offered her hand. "Nurse Hayes, my name is Special Agent Karen Voss. I appreciate you taking a moment." Lily shook her hand, but didn't sit down. "Hospital Legal will be joining us in a few minutes," she said. "I want you to know that up front." Voss's expression didn't change, which told Lily she'd been warned that the direct approach had already failed with Daniels and had adjusted her expectations accordingly. "Of course," she said. "I only need a few minutes." "Then talk quickly," Lily said. "I have patience." Voss sat. Lily remained standing. "We're not here to create problems for you," Voss said. "Your contact with Mr. Mercer has been entirely consistent with your professional role. We understand that." A pause. "What we'd like is very simple. We're not asking you to become an informant. We're not asking you to obtain information. We'd simply like to know if at any point during your interactions with him, he has said anything that concerned you. Anything that made you feel unsafe or suggested an imminent threat to others. It was good. Lily acknowledged that internally it was a much better approach than Daniel's reframed entirely around her safety rather than their investigation asking for something that sounded like basic civic concern rather than cooperation with the prosecution. It was also, she noted, still the same thing wearing different clothes. "No," she said, "he hasn't. Nothing at all. Nothing at all." Voss looked at her with the patient, careful attention of someone who had done this long enough to know when a door was closed. "Nurse Hayes, I want to be honest with you about something. The person who was photographing the restaurant last night," Lily kept her face completely still. She had not told anyone at the hospital about that message from Wren. The fact that Voss was referencing it told her two things simultaneously: that the FBI knew about the photographer and that they were choosing to tell her about it, which meant they wanted her to understand that their surveillance was closer and more comprehensive than she might have assumed. It was a pressure point. She recognized it for what it was. "I'm aware of the photographer," Lily said evenly, "and I'm aware that you're referencing it now to remind me that you have broader visibility into my life than I might find comfortable." She held Voss's gaze. "That's a technique. I recognize it. And my answer is still no." Voss was quiet for a moment. Something in her expression shifted, not hostility, but a kind of genuine assessment that was different from the practiced professionalism of the last few minutes. "You're not what I expected," she said. "I'm exactly what I appear to be," Lily said, "which is a nurse who takes patient confidentiality and personal loyalty seriously and who does not respond well to indirect pressure." She paused. "If you have evidence that I've broken a law, charge me. If you don't, please stop coming to my workplace." The hospital legal representative, a thin man named Morrison, who moved with the speed of someone who knew exactly what situation he was walking into, came through the lounge door at that moment. He looked at Voss, looked at Lily, and positioned himself beside Lily with the quiet efficiency of someone establishing a line. Voss stood. She looked at Lily one more time with an expression that was almost, if you were being generous, something like respect. "We'll be in touch through official channels," she said. "I'll respond through my attorney," Lily said. Voss left. Morrison looked at Lily. "You've already been contacted once. Last night, by phone. An Agent Daniels." Morrison made a note. "Don't speak to them again without me present. About anything." "I understand." She paused. "How serious is this?" Morrison pressed his lips together in the way of a lawyer calculating what to say. "The federal investigation into Mercer's organization is real and active. Your contact with him is being documented. Whether that becomes a problem for you depends entirely on whether you've done anything that could be characterized as obstruction or facilitation." He looked at her directly. "Have you—" "No," she said. "Then stay that course." He closed his notepad. "I'll make some calls today." She walked back to her floor with the steady, deliberate pace of someone who was not going to let the morning's events reorganize her entirely, and she went back to her patients, and she did her job, and she was good at it, and she held on to that, the way she would hold on to something solid in rough water. At 12:30, her phone rang. Not Wren's number, not John's number, a completely unknown number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer. Then she did. "Nurse Hayes." The voice was male and older, with the unhurried quality of a man who had learned that time worked differently for him than for everyone else. "My name is Victor Cassell. I believe you know who I am." She didn't, and then she did. Because the name Victor Cassell had come up exactly once in the past week, in a conversation she had been adjacent to rather than part of a brief exchange between John and Wren that had stopped the moment she came within hearing distance. She had noted it, filed it, done nothing with it. "I know the name," she said carefully. "Then you know I'm not affiliated with the federal government," he said, "and I'm not affiliated with John Mercer despite what certain people might suggest." A pause. "I'm calling because I believe you're in a position that is more complicated than you understand, and I have information that is relevant to your safety." Her hand tightened on the phone. "How did you get this number?" "The same way everyone else has," he said, which told her nothing and everything simultaneously. "I'd like to meet with you." "No," she said. "Nurse Hayes." I've had this conversation twice in 12 hours, she said. My answer doesn't improve with repetition. If you have information relevant to my safety, you can provide it to the Chicago Police Department. She paused. Don't call this number again. She hung up and immediately called Ren. He answered on the first ring. She said, Victor Cassell just called me. And the silence on the other end of the line was so immediate and so complete that it told her with total clarity that this was the most alarming thing she had said to anyone all week. Don't go anywhere alone, Ren said. His voice was completely level, and that was what scared her. Ren used that voice when he was managing something serious. I'm sending Torres to the hospital now. He'll be in the lobby. Ren, who is Victor Cassell? A pause. Not calculation this time, something more like a decision. He's the man who ordered the hit on John, he said. Not the federal informant, the one who contracted it, who used the federal investigation as cover. Another pause. He's not the FBI's asset. He's the reason the investigation exists. He's been feeding them information about John for 2 years to clear the market. The break room was very quiet. Lily stood completely still. He called me, she said. I know. We're running the number now. Ren's voice shifted slightly, not warmer exactly, but with more of what was underneath the professionalism. Lily, you did not get involved in a simple situation. I need you to understand that right now, completely. I understand it, she said. Do you want to leave? He said. If you want to step away from all of this, I will personally make sure that happens cleanly. No complications, no pressure. That is John's position as well. If you want out, you leave freely and fully. She stood in the break room with the phone pressed to her ear, and she thought about every moment of the past week with the ruthless clarity that came when the stakes became real enough to cut through everything else. She thought about the trauma gurney and the gray eyes opening. She thought about the dressing in the wrong position, and the fever at 2 a.m., and the 3 men at Jackie's desk, and the parking garage, and the restaurant, and the sidewalk, and every conversation in between. She thought about what Jackie had said, remember who you are in that room, not who he makes you feel like. And she sat with that honestly. She knew who she was. She had always known. I'm not leaving, she said. Torres was in the lobby when she came down 20 minutes later. He looked at her with the particular expression she had come to read as his version of reassurance, steady present without drama. You all right? He said. I've had a complicated morning, she said. Yeah, he said. I heard. She went back to work. She finished her shift. She kept herself grounded in the specific physical reality of her patients, their names, their diagnoses, their fears, their questions, and she did not let the afternoon fold in on itself under the weight of everything pressing from the outside. At 4:15, she went to the 7th floor. John knew before she said anything. She could see it in the set of his jaw, the particular quality of alertness that was different from his baseline, tighter, more inward. Ren had told him. Of course he had. She sat in the chair beside his bed and looked at him directly. Tell me everything, she said. Not the version you've been editing for my benefit, all of it. He held her gaze for a moment, then he started talking. Victor Cassell had run the South Side distribution network for 15 years, adjacent to Mercer territory contained by a series of agreements that had held because both sides understood the cost of breaking them. 2 years ago, Cassell had decided that the agreements were no longer serving him. Instead of moving directly, he had begun feeding selective information to the FBI, not enough to expose himself enough to build a case around John. The federal investigation was real, the agents were real, but the intelligence driving it had been shaped and curated by a man with a commercial interest in John Mercer's removal. The stabbing had been the escalation. Not a clean removal. The informant had gone further than instructed, nearly killed John instead of merely hospitalizing him. And now Cassell had a problem. The plan had been to use the hospitalization period to consolidate territory while John was immobilized and under federal scrutiny. Instead, John was healing faster than projected. The FBI's unofficial approaches had been shut down cleanly, and Cassell was recalibrating. The call to Lily had been the recalibration. He called you to gauge your position, John said. If you had agreed to meet him, he would have used you as leverage. Against me, against the investigation, against both simultaneously. He paused. You refusing him immediately, that removed the option, but it also told him something. That I'm not neutral, she said. Yes. So now I'm a variable in his calculation. Yes. His jaw was tight. Lily. Don't, she said. Don't apologize. Don't tell me I should leave. We already had that conversation through Ren, and my answer is the same in person. She held his gaze. What I need from you right now is the truth about how this ends. Not reassurance. The truth. He was quiet for a moment. Castle is exposed, he said. The position he built over 2 years assumed that I would either be dead or in federal custody by now. Neither has happened. My lawyers have been working with material we've had on him for 8 months material that documents his role in shaping the federal investigation with false and selective intelligence. That goes to the U.S. Attorney's Office this week. He paused. When it does, the investigation into me effectively collapses at its source, and Castle becomes the subject of a federal inquiry instead. She processed that. You've had this for 8 months. We needed the timing to be right. And the timing is right now because he overplayed, John said. The stabbing, the call to you. He moved too fast and too visibly because he thought I was vulnerable. His gray eyes were steady. He was wrong. She sat with that for a moment. The full architecture of it, the layers and the patience and the carefully held counterposition settling into a shape she could see completely now. You've been waiting, she said. Yes. And I walked into the middle of it at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. Something moved through his expression that was not almost a smile. It was a real one, brief and genuine and slightly undone, the kind that she understood. Now he did not give easily or often. Yes, he said. You did. She looked at her hands for a moment. Then she looked back at him. I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer it the same way I answer you directly without editing. All right, when this is over, when the legal situation resolves and Cassell is handled and the federal investigation collapses, what does your life look like, the actual day-to-day of it? He held her gaze, and she could see him deciding how honest to be and then deciding to be completely honest. Different from what it's been, he said. I've been building toward a transition for 3 years. The investigation accelerated that. The structure of what I manage, it changes. Some of it disappears. Some of it becomes legitimate in ways it couldn't before. He paused. I'm not going to tell you I become a different person. I won't. But the world I operate in becomes a different shape. That's honest, she said. You asked for honest. She stood up. She walked to the window and stood with her back to him for a moment, looking at Chicago, the million small lights of a city that contained everything, all of it at once, the extraordinary and the ordinary and the dangerous and the everyday, all running together without clean lines between them. She turned around. When Dr. Reeves clears you for discharge, she said, I'll coordinate your outpatient wound care protocol through the hospital system, professionally and correctly. She held his gaze. And after that, after the wound is healed and the professional relationship has its natural end, we can have a different conversation about what the rest of it looks like. John looked at her for a long moment, the gray eyes steady and clear, and for the first time since she had known him fully unguarded. A different conversation, he said. A different conversation, she confirmed. He nodded once, slow and deliberate, like a man accepting terms he had not expected to be offered, and was not going to diminish by making a larger gesture than was warranted. 3 days later, the package of documentation went to the U.S. Attorney's Office. Lily learned about it from Morrison, her hospital attorney, who called her at 8 a.m. to tell her that the federal interest in her contact with John Mercer appeared to have shifted significantly overnight, and that she should expect the scrutiny to reduce considerably in the coming weeks. He used the careful language of a lawyer who knew more than he was saying and was saying exactly as much as the situation required. She thanked him and hung up and stood at the nurse's station for a moment with the phone in her hand, and Jackie appeared beside her with 2 coffees and said nothing, just set one down, and Lily picked it up and took a long sip and said, I think it's going to be okay. Jackie looked at her. The situation, all of it. Jackie was quiet for a moment. How okay? Okay enough, Lily said. "The kind of okay that requires work and attention and honesty and probably more complicated mornings than I would have had if I'd let someone else step forward in that ER." She paused. "But okay." Jackie looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, "You're different." "I know. I don't mean that as a criticism." "I know that too." Lily picked up her chart. "The good kind of different or the worrying kind?" Jackie considered. "The kind that comes from going through something real," she said, "and coming out the other side knowing exactly who you are." John Mercer was discharged on a Thursday morning with a written outpatient protocol, a surgical follow-up scheduled for the following week, and the particular carefully controlled expression of a man who was managing the emotion of an occasion without letting it show in any way he wasn't ready for. Torres brought the car around. Wren stood near the elevator with the patient stillness she had come to understand as his form of affection. Lily walked him to the elevator. They stood in the corridor for a moment, just outside the suite, and she handed him the printed discharge instructions and said, "Twice weekly wound checks for 2 weeks. No negotiating on that." "Understood," he said, "and the pain medication on schedule. Not when the jaw does the thing, on schedule." "I know. And if anything changes, fever, redness, increased discharge, you call the outpatient line immediately, not Wren, the line." "Lily." "What?" "I know," he said, and the way he said it this time was different from the clinical compliance of a patient. It was the tone of a man speaking directly to a person he knew. "I'll follow the protocol, every part of it." She looked at him. "Good." The elevator arrived. He stepped in and turned to face her, and the doors began to close. And in the last second before they did, he said, "The different conversation, I haven't forgotten." "Neither have I," she said. The doors closed. She stood in the corridor for a moment. Torres was already gone. The 7th floor was quiet and ordinary around her, the way hospitals were ordinary temporarily between emergencies in the ordinary spaces of healing. She took a breath. She went back to work. She had a patient in room 3 who needed a medication adjustment, a discharge in room 7 that required a 20-minute family explanation, and a new admission coming up from the ER whose chart she needed to review before he arrived. She handled all 3 with the full present attention they deserved, because they deserved it, because every person who came through those doors deserved someone who showed up for them completely. That evening, walking to her car through the parking structure that no longer had federal agents sitting in it, her phone buzzed. His number. A message. No words. Just an address on the north side and a time Saturday at 7 p.m., and then a single line beneath it. "If you want." She stopped walking. She stood in the garage and she looked at the message for a long moment, and she thought about everything she had walked through in the past 10 days. The storm and the blood and the gray eyes and the FBI and the fear and the honesty and the moments that had mattered, all of them, every single one. And she thought about Jackie saying, "You know who you are," and Maya saying the thing that made him look in the first place, and Catherine's carefully fractured guardedness that had become something almost like warmth over a dinner table in a place that smelled like garlic and bread. She typed back, "I'll be there." She put the phone in her bag and walked to her car and drove home through a city she had lived in for 5 years and thought she knew completely, which had turned out to contain an entire world she had never seen, a world that had its own gravity and its own code and its own kind of people, some of them frightening, some of them surprising, and one of them against every reasonable expectation, a man whose gray eyes saw her clearly and whose silence said more than most people's loudest speeches. Lily Hayes had walked into the worst night of a dangerous man's life with nothing but training and instinct and the refusal to let someone die when she could stop it. She had not known in that moment that she was walking into her own story as much as his. She knew it now. She had chosen it with both eyes open on her own terms, in her own voice, without flinching. And that the choosing the clarity, the refusal to be anything less than exactly who she was the thing that had changed everything for both of them.